Hackers are working hard this summer. We told you Monday about a cyber attack on Apple iPhones, and we're also learning about a huge number of stolen passwords. So we wanted to catch up with our cybersecurity expert, Dave Hatter, this morning. Dave, we're going to talk about both of these issues. Start with the iPhones. People are getting phishing emails or text messages telling them that they need to click and provide their information and all that stuff. First thing you get that message, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah, it is, Sheila. And I think it's so important for people to understand. First off, the Apple environment is huge. There's about 1.5 billion users worldwide, so you got a lot of targets. And secondarily, it's so easy to spoof or create a fake phone call, a fake text, or a fake email. Symantec, which is a well-known cybersecurity company, has been warning that they've seen a lot of phishing-related scams, both via email and text, sent to Apple users trying to convince them that there's something wrong with their iCloud, there's something wrong with their Apple ID. And as a reminder, your Apple ID is kind of the key to unlocks your entire Apple kingdom. If you let bad guys get the credentials to log into your Apple ID, they literally can do anything. They can lock you out of your phone. If you have something like Apple Pay connected to that or subscriptions, they can take those over. So it's super important to protect your Apple ID credentials. One of the recommendations, of course, is to turn on multi-factor authentication. We talk about that all the time on here. That's also two-factor authentication or two-step verification. So if you get some kind of usually urgent, socially engineered phishing telling you that there's something wrong with your Apple account, iCloud, whatever, you probably should ignore it. If you're worried about it, then go to Apple on your own, apple.com, log into your account. Make sure you turn on that MFA because, again, if you make this easy for the bad guys, they literally can pretty much ruin your life by locking you out of your phone, which is going to lock you out of everything else, and possibly stealing your money.
Okay, so let's talk now about the stolen passwords. There's this new scam called RockYou2024, and what they've done is they put together leaked passwords that are old, but also some new leaked passwords. It's massive. What does this mean for people?
Yeah, Sheila. So this kind of also touches on the Apple ID thing, because one of the things the bad guys know is people will use the same password on multiple accounts. It's called password reuse. So if your password is leaked in this RockYou2024 breach, it's almost 10 billion passwords. And for example, your password happens to be in there, and that's the same from account A, but you use it for your Apple ID, they might be able to get in if you don't have MFA turned on. So when the bad guys get these giant dumps of passwords, they'll typically do one of two things. They'll use brute force programs to try to crack those passwords, because usually they're not in plain text. It's not visible to the naked eye. It's sort of hidden, but they'll try to crack those. And then they know, again, people use the same passwords on multiple accounts because they don't have a password manager, they're not using MFA. And let's say that I get your Facebook password, and that also happens to be the same password that you use for your bank account or your health insurance or something. Well, now I'm in. And then they'll also use credential stuffing. They'll take these passwords and just spray them out there, with usenames and accounts trying to get in it. It's not like they're targeting you or me, Sheila, necessarily.
They're targeting everybody. But before we run out of time, let me just ask you, Dave. You mentioned multi-factor authentication. You mentioned using different passwords and using a password manager. But if you have, you had a bad day, you weren't paying attention, this happened and your iPhone is locked or your account is taken over, what can you do?
Well, unfortunately, you're going to have a really bad day probably, because other than reach out to Apple and go through their account reset process and try to work with Apple, and again, if you happen to be one of those people that really only works off a phone, you're going to have a really hard time with that. That's one of the reasons why this is so important to try to prevent up front. You do not want this to happen to you.
Right. Well, I do want to let people know that I put up a link on local12.com where you can check if your phone or your email password is compromised in any of these breaches, and then you can get out and start changing your passwords and things. Dave, thanks so much. Always good information. Appreciate you.
Always my pleasure, Sheila. Thanks.
And we'll be right back.
Hey there. Yeah, you could stop watching right now, but let's be honest, you don't want to do that. Hit the links or click subscribe to see more amazing content from all of us here at Local 12.